Hello and welcome back to Gamebox, the show where we take a look at games yesteryear. And today, we'll be taking a look at a game from the PlayStation 3 era, a game that expands on the groundwork of a prior foundation, a game that did try to do something new with established characters, a game that once again showed the world how great the Batman IP can be when utilized correctly, a little game called Batman: Arkham City. Developed once again by Rocksteady Studios, and published by WB Games, with association of DC Comics, something I forgot to mention in a previous episode. After the release of Arkham Asylum, the world was introduced to the world that Rocksteady had created for the Caped Crusader, and the fun gameplay and fantastic atmosphere the Asylum won so many people over, myself included. This game put Rocksteady on the map and proved that comic book based games can be more than men in spandex beating people up. So now how do they capitalize on this momentum? Maybe try to hand out a sequel? Ideas for the Dark Knight's next escapade were actually being formed before the development of Arkham Asylum was complete. In fact, an Easter egg had been hidden away, giving a hint on what they had planned for the future of the Arkham series. An Easter egg that wouldn't be found for a year, leaving Rocksteady to leak it themselves. Development for Arkham City kicked off in 2009. The main goal of Rocksteady was to expand upon the world that was forged in Arkham Asylum. It was estimated that at least $10 million had been spent on viral marketing. This had included audio recordings, videos, ads, and even having actors in costume attend press events. So they went all out for their new project, wanted to get it to as many gamers as possible. The main idea behind the new game was to take Batman from the Asylum to the streets of Gotham. There were many ideas that Rocksteady wanted to implement. One idea was to place a time limit on the detective vision, as in Arkham Asylum they did notice that some players did tend to use it during a good portion of their playthroughs. This was something that wasn't intended by the developers, but ultimately decided against it. Instead, they opted to have the mode obscure waypoints and blurred when players are hit by enemies. Another idea was to bring in the Batmobile once more, but due to destruction in Arkham Asylum, it wouldn't make driving through the streets viable. The story itself was intended to be darker than its predecessor. Rocksteady was able to get Mark Hamill and Kevin Conroy to return. However, Arlene Sorkin wasn't able to come back, as she had retired in 2001 from the character of Harley Quinn, so Tara Strong was brought in as her successor. Initially, Mark Hamill was not intending to return to voice the Joker, wanted to leave the character on a high note, but he was convinced to come aboard once he learned that Kevin Conroy and Paul Dini would be returning as well. While expanding upon the world of the Arkhamverse, the actual sandbox was expanded as well, and that meant more villains would be making an appearance, as well as other characters from the Bat family, adding Catwoman and Robin to the fray. A teaser was soon released showing off the feel of the new game. It also showcased a Joker that had seen better days. This sparked interest in the new game. Another new thing Rocksteady wanted to add was multiplayer, but decided to focus on single player instead. They aimed to make things a lot bigger with Arkham City, in both scope and gameplay. Arkham City was released on PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 in North America on October 18, 2011, Australia October 19, 2011, and in Europe October 21, 2011. On Windows in North America on November 22, 2011, in Australia on November 23, 2011, and in Europe November 25, 2011. On the Wii U in North America on November 18, 2012, and for the PAL region on November 30, 2012, and on Mac worldwide on December 13, 2012. It was also re-released for PlayStation 4 and Xbox One on October 18, 2016. Arkham City gained nearly perfect scores across the board. It was even labeled the best licensed video game ever made, according to Game Informer's Andrew Rayner. It even had Game Master stating about Arkham City, the gold standard by which all future video games should be judged. The only smudge on the game's rep was a port on the Wii U. This version was criticized for the addition of the BAT mode, or Bat Armor Tech mode, for this version of the game. This made bats hit harder and made combat much easier, but overall the reception for Arkham City was fantastic. And with that, let's take a look at today's game.
Live from Arkham City, the controversial super prison built right here in the heart of Gotham.
Arkham City takes place a year after the events of Arkham Asylum, and in that time frame a few things happen for the city of Gotham. For one, Quincy Sharp, you remember him, this guy, he became mayor of Gotham City. Not only that, but he decided it was a good idea to shut down both Arkham Asylum and Blackgate Prison, and shuffle occupants of both into one central location, that location being his new super prison, Arkham City. Now that you're caught up, now to the main story. Well, at a rally to speak out against the super prison's construction, millionaire playboy...
Billionaire, Vicky. Millionaires are so last year.
Oh, sorry. Billionaire playboy, Bruce Wayne is arrested and thrown to the wolves within Arkham City. But who is behind it? That would be one Hugo Strange. And who is he and why is he so important? Well, it just so happens that he knows Batman's biggest secret. That would be who is behind the cowl. But now within the walls of Arkham City, Bats need to suit up and figure out what Strange has planned for the grime of the prison. even if it means going through the muck that is Gotham's greatest villains. Batman Arkham City is a third-person action-adventure game. Again, there are 3 forms of gameplay. First up is the combat. The combat was taken from Arkham Asylum, and this is a case if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And that's not always a bad thing. They did add something to make it more interesting, this being more quickfire options for some of the gadgets, even adding more gadgets overall. They even gave Bats the ability to counter multiple enemies at once. And there are even more moves and enemy types to challenge Bat's pugilist skills. The OGs return from Asylum, that being Batarangs, Grapnel Gun, Line Launcher, and Explosive Gel. Some of the new gadgets that get to hang on Bat's utility belt are Remote Charge Gun. This gun lets Bats shoot out electric charge that can knock down enemies or make larger enemies flail about, which can be useful to give Bats some breathing room. There is the Freeze Blast Grenades. This lets Bats toss a grenade that freezes a single enemy. This one is useful if you have an enemy that you need to keep conscious during the duration of the fisticuffs. And finally, the Disruptor. This lets Bats disable weapons from a distance, taking away the enemy's ability to turn Bats to Swiss cheese. Each gadget was very useful and very fun to use in combat. The stealth, like combat, was also taken from Asylum. And like combat, it had some improvements with the new gadgets. This game also gives Bats new ways to take down his targets. But even with the new moves and gadgets, there are still some challenges Bats has to face. These come in the form of enemies outplaced on mines, some that'll scan vantage points. Overall, it was cool to see these new additions. Exploration is another pillar of gameplay, and it too gets a bit of an overhaul. Since Arkham City aimed to expand upon Asylum, this led to the overall game world to open up as well. In response, Bats is able to glide freely around Arkham City in order to reach his next mission, or simply to explore. It's here where the gadgets again come into play. Sprinkled around the game map are 282 Riddler trophies. Yeah, you heard me right. 282, and I didn't get them all. And this is part of the 440 Riddler challenges. Challenges not only include trophies, but also breakable objects, riddles, and tiger cameras, most of which go towards the Riddler side story. And trust me, you want to complete this side story, if only to get a 1-up on the smug bastard. The number may seem intimidating, but there is something to make that trophy hunt a bit easier, that being Batman's ability to interrogate Riddler informants. Doing this will reveal the locations of Riddler trophies, as well as other collectibles. And like in Asylum, collecting these grants Bats XP to upgrade his gear and moves. Detective Vision makes a return as well. It not only does the usual shenanigans, it can also be used to scan certain crime scenes, giving the player the feeling of being in the shoes of the world's greatest detective. But these parts are few and far between, and could have been expanded on a bit more. Another thing the players can do is actually play as Catwoman, assuming they shell out the necessary doubloons to play as her. She has a different feel from Bats himself, with her own moves and gadgets. As far as bosses, they did a good job. There are some that felt the same as Asylum, but there are others that actually make you use a noodle in order to beat them. One of my favorite fights is the one against Mr. Freeze. As in that one, Bats has to change up how he takes on the boss, as after each attempt, Mr. Freeze will launch a countermeasure against that method. It was a really fun fight, so they did good on that front. A quick note, I would highly recommend doing the AR gliding missions as soon as possible. Doing a few of them unlocks the Grapnel Accelerator upgrade, which is super helpful for exploration. And as an added plus, it does give you some practice with the new gliding mechanics.
Tell me what I want to know about Riddler, or get ready to eat through a straw.
This is all I know. Don't hurt me.
Of course not.
Batman Arkham City, like its predecessor, still looks pretty damn good. The character models kept that comic/realistic look from Asylum. Even the little things like the camera being distorted when being hit by a battered pipe was a nice touch. The entire play area is a Batman fan's dream. There are so many Easter eggs littered around Arkham City, most of which are tied to riddles. Arkham City does nail that grimy feel one would come to expect from Gotham. The voice work from Mark Hamill and Kevin Conroy were as awesome as ever. And Tara Strong did a great job as Harley Quinn. There were additional voice work from Nolan North, who voiced the Penguin, and Troy Baker, who voiced Two-Face, both of which came as a surprise to me. But overall, the voice work was spot on. The music was top notch once again, and the sound effects did pack that same punch. I only came across one major glitch during my run. The game froze up leading to a restart, but after that instance, it ran great. Beyond that, I didn't really have any issues with the game itself.
Will you save me, ignorant guard? I'll be shocked if you do.
So, all in all, is this a game you need to go out and play? Yes. A definite hard yes. Arkham City aimed to outshine its predecessor, and I feel it did just that. Maybe it was the improved combat, or the larger game area with its Easter egg filled environments, or the inclusion of more Batman's rogues gallery, or even its story, taking risks with its finale. Sure, there were some minor gripes. Some of the side stories did have a lackluster ending. I mean, sure, some of them do get a payoff in later games, but if you're playing it for the first time, I can see the downside of having to wait for the next installment to see what happens next. Another thing that Arkham City adds to the gumbo is DLC. It has oodles of costumes that player can don either in the New Game Plus mode or in the challenge rooms. These are merely cosmetic, but they are nice to look at. Nightwing and Robin were added to the challenge room as playable characters. Though I will say it was a missed opportunity to not have Nightwing talk, but it was still awesome to play as my favorite DC character. Each character has their different movesets, and do indeed feel different from the Bats himself. There's also a DLC that takes place after the events of the main story, where the player takes control of Robin to find the missing Batman. And I will say, some of the Riddler trophies were a pain in the ass to get, but overall my experience at Arkham City was great, damn near perfect, and it ended up becoming one of my favorite games that I do go back and play through from time to time. So if you can get jiggy with that, then I say give this one a try. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a city to save.
Arriving at the observation deck.
Hey, welcome to the end of the video, and thank you for making it this far. This one was actually pretty fun to go back through. The next game we'll be taking a look at will not involve Rocksteady at all. In fact, a whole new studio will be helming the project. And oh, it's a trip. But until then, you know what to do. Spread the awesome, and I'll see you next time.